when we come then to the gospel text, our interpretation doesn't get much easier, does it? Here the disciples are asking Jesus to increase their faith. And well might they do so, because that at least expresses an understanding of the source of faith. But Jesus' response, well, you can take it a couple of different ways, can't you? On the one hand, it could be saying, Jesus could be saying to the 12, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, which you don't, or he could be saying, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, which you do. And we don't know how the disciples might have taken it. But in a sense, the result is the same. Rearranging the landscape. Now, while it might be miraculous to see a mulberry tree uprooted and planted in the ocean, did I say mulberry seed? Mulberry tree. While it might be miraculous to see that, it would also be silly and ridiculous. And Jesus uses hyperbole here. He uses an exaggeration to show something. And we probably have already heard of this kind of thing. Back in the, oh gosh, it must have been when I was in high school or maybe college, I think. It was popular among Christians to have a piece of jewelry that was a mustard seed encased in plastic or glass, which actually had the effect of magnifying the appearance of the seed because it is so small. And Jesus is saying to these 12, if you had the faith the size of a mustard seed, whether you do or don't, you could do great things. You could rearrange the landscape. Not necessarily uprooting trees and planting them in the ocean, but we can rearrange our spiritual and emotional and psychological and mental landscapes. We can become different. Our faith makes us different because it doesn't matter, or rather the emphasis is not on us, you see. We may say our faith, but there is a recognition by the disciples, by the apostles, the 12, that the source of faith is outside of themselves. In a sense, it isn't really their faith at all. It is God's faith in them back to God. You see, they receive faith. They get faith as a gift. It isn't something they or we can manufacture for ourselves. It is something that comes from outside us and is directed, then we direct it back to its source. The power of faith does not lie in us or what we believe. The power of faith lies in the giver of the gift. Our faith, the faith of the 12, the faith of the apostles, comes from outside and then reflects off of us back out onto the world. It's like we're a window or a lens for faith. We're not the source, but faith passes through us. Faith reflects off of us and changes the way we see the world. And in fact, changes the world. But it's a difficult thing. It isn't easy. Because we can't manufacture our own faith, and because the world tells us that we ought to be able to do things for ourselves. You know, that great saying from the Bible, God helps those who help themselves. Oh, wait, that isn't in the Bible, is it? That saying is what the world thinks. We ought to be able to do that for ourselves, but we can't. So there is, at the heart of faith, attitude of humility. Recognition that God is great. We are not great, except insofar as God is in us. But God is great. Some sources that I read this week as I was studying for the sermon said that pastors ought to stop at that point because the next couple of verses are just too bizarre, too difficult. You should just let them go. Because while we could put this first saying in a positive light, it's kind of difficult to put the second saying in a positive light. Which of you, if you had a slave who came in from the field, would say, "Come on, sit down, have some dinner"? And the answer, of course, is, well, none of us would do that. Certainly the 12 would understand the culture of slavery and understand this. Jesus is not saying that, not encouraging or advocating slavery as a culture or as a way of relating to one another. It's just putting things in proper perspective. God is the master, we are the servants. But which of you would say to the slave, "Have some dinner with me, sit down"? No, that's not what you do. You tell the slave who just come in from the fields, "Make me some dinner and serve me, and then maybe if there's anything left later on, you can have something to eat." Don't expect any thanks for doing your duty. We do have to be careful with this saying. We don't want to overemphasize that slavery bit. In a world that for centuries, millennia, forever, has told women, "You're only good for what you can do," in terms of making babies. You're worthless in yourselves. In a world that has told women this forever, we have to be careful here. We can't encourage that kind of thinking. In a world that tells the poor, "You're only good for what you can do for yourselves, and heaven knows we're not going to help you,"